You're listening to Investify, preaching financial independence and assisting investors to achieve a more flexible and free lifestyle through smart financial planning and real estate investing. If leaving the corporate world and jumping into this thriving industry is what you desire, tune in and listen to stories of like-minded individuals who made the leap to financial independence. Equip yourself with the right tips and tricks to start your real estate journey, making active or passive ventures that are highly profitable and rewarding. Here are your hosts, Craig Curelop and Zeona McIntyre.
What's going on, everybody? You are listening to Investify. My name is Craig Curelop, aka the Fi Guy, and I am here without my co-host today, Z Money, aka Zeona McIntyre. She just got married literally yesterday. She went and did the whole courthouse certificate thingy. So shoot her a DM and tell her congratulations on getting married. It's an amazing thing. And also, on top of that, she wasn't feeling well. So we're going to give her the day off. But we have an amazing guest today by the name of Nick Beveridge. Nick is becoming a really good friend of mine. So I moved up here to northern Idaho in January. Nick and I met maybe a few months ago, probably in the fall of 2022. And we've really, we've hung out a whole bunch, we've talked a whole bunch, and he's been such a great resource in kind of helping me get acclimated to this real estate market here. He's got a phenomenal team of his own and just an all-around really great guy with some really great knowledge. And the best part about this is that Nick comes from really, really humble beginnings. And I don't mean like he grew up poor. I mean, he got kicked and batted and beat in real estate, and he just stuck with it, and now it's really paying off for him. And so, without further ado, I want to bring Nick Beveridge onto the show. Nick Beveridge, welcome to the show, my friend. How you doing today, dude?
Doing really well this morning, but I am freezing. It's what, like -5 in North Idaho right now? Something like that?
Something like that. All I know is I feel like the snow on the ground is so cold that it's now like caked over in ice and you like can't even get through it. It's like that cold. So, yeah. It is. I think there's a cold front sweeping the United States right now. I got buddies up in Canada. They say it's like -47 or something crazy. So
oh my gosh,
maybe we're blessed with just being sick. We're still above zero. Anyway, the weather is cold, but your story is hot, and we want to hear it from the beginning, dude. So tell us.
That is a good transition.
Yeah, try and man. My transitions are usually pretty rough, but tell us, man, how did you first hear about financial independence?
So I guess what first got me interested about financial independence was actually I was on a road trip when I think I was 19 with a buddy of mine, and we were driving around the country. And we stopped at my grandmother's house in San Diego, California for a few days. And I remember her sitting me down, and it wasn't awkward, but it was just unique. Because she doesn't usually talk much. She's from Germany and really heavy accent. But she started to tell me that, hey, while you're young, why don't you start putting away something for retirement? Because she said, the government's likely not going to be there for you. She's like, Social Security, pension plans, I've got all that, but you probably won't. So she said, you got to do something to put away money now while you're young. And that was kind of the first time somebody ever really kind of gave me some hard, true advice as an adult to do something about my future, if that makes sense.
That is like one of the smartest things I've ever heard. When I was 18, someone just told me to start investing for retirement, so I did. I didn't question it or anything like that. But the fact that like your grandmother is so right, the government's not going to be around for you. If you think the government cares about you, that's a laugh in your face. The only reason why, they offer 401ks and Roth IRAs is for their own benefit, to take their own money. And so man, what happened? So that conversation with your grandma, that clearly it resonated with you. And so can you give us a year as to when that happened? Like, just so we've got a time reference.
Yeah, that was the summer of 2007, and it was one of the best summers of my life. I went on 2 road trips around the country, had a great time, spent all my money. I mean, I had to quit my job to go on these road trips, and had a lot of fun. But when I came back, I was broke, had to get another job. And I remember I started working at this dealership, and they had they had a flyer somewhere in the back, and it said that we're bringing in a couple of financial guys to talk about your future retirement if you're interested in checking it out. And it's $100 to go hear them speak. And I don't know what got into me, but I was just like, okay, I've never done anything like this, but I'll spend $100. And it was like all that I had at the time.
Oh man!
But I spent $100 to come, to hear these guys, and it was and I was the only guy that signed up for it. So
really,
so these two guys came in, and it was just me. So we went to no, I'm sorry, I brought a roommate with me. But I was the only guy at the dealership that actually signed up for it, and I brought my roommate with me. But we sat down, and these guys started teaching us about compound interest, and they were financial advisors. They were selling us on mutual funds and that kind of stuff. But it was the first time anybody ever kind of broke down the magic of compound interest over time. It was the first time I ever heard about that. And then then I started remembering back to my middle school, high school days, learning about inflation, and it all just started to click for me that I really need to do something now, because financially I felt like if I didn't, things are just going to get worse over time with the economy and inflation and prices going up and income's not really catching up.
Wow, it's like you had a crystal ball there back in 2007, 2008.
Yeah. So that was just kind of my first intro to the financial world, because I'm pretty dumb. I was pretty stupid in high school. I was always getting C's and stuff, and my parents were not entrepreneurs or anything, so they didn't really teach me much. My dad did tell me though, don't go working for anybody else, and he was a self-employed kind of guy, but he never really made a substantial amount of money. I guess I mostly did this out of fear, and started down this journey because I convinced myself that if I didn't do something, I was absolutely going to be a broke old man, and that really motivated me to do something early, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely, man. And you discovered this at the right time, right? And anyone listening to this that is younger, right, in their teens or early 20s, time is on your side. And time is the best return, right? The longer you hold on to something, the more wealthy you're going to get. Warren Buffett didn't acquire most of his riches, 90% of his riches, until he hit age 70 or something like that. So make sure,
right? Yeah.
Start early, and your wealth will really grow over time. All right, Nick. So you get out of this financial class, right, at the car dealership, which is the most random place ever. I know. What do you do next, right? You're 19 years old. You now have $0 because you spent your last 100. What's going on?
Well, so the next part was I don't know if you've heard of this network marketing company called ACN. I was sold on it by my older brother. Got into this network marketing group, like a pyramid scheme type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And I started going to these meetings, and it was $500 to sign up, but then they showed you the magic of, residual income. And it was just it was more educational than anything. I never actually made any money doing this thing, but I did sign up. I got a couple of people under me. And then, but I got the wrong people. They weren't motivated as much as I was, and still, I didn't really actually believe in the product or the company. So maybe that's why I didn't do too well at it. And I did, and at this time, they kind of convinced me I should read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I listened to the audio of that, and then I got on the real estate train, and I decided I've got to buy a house. I was also living at my brother's house. And he bought a house and got a bunch of roommates, and he didn't really have to pay rent. He just collected rent and lived for free. So I was also kind of inspired by my brother to just copy what he did. Wow. And go buy a house and get roommates. But yeah.
So your brother was house hacking. So I went and
cool. Yes, he was house hacking before it was a thing. And he showed me that he was able to get this house on an 80-20 combo loan. So he got a loan for 80% of the purchase price, and then another loan for 20%. And he said that he had to bring $300 as a deposit, and then he got the seller to cover all his closing costs, and he got his $300 back when he closed on this house. So he basically got the house for free, got roommates, and was living for free for a couple of years. And it's just a model that like made sense to me, and so I wanted to go do the same thing, but I was very young, didn't know what I was doing. I bought a house out in Kellogg because it was the only thing I could afford, and Kellogg's a very small town in North Idaho. Not much going on with the economy there. I went and I got a job in sales because Rich Dad Poor Dad recommended that you got to brush up on your sales skills if you're going to be an entrepreneur. So I just did that, even though I was super. By the way, I was really afraid to talk to people at this time in my life. I was always a shy kid, very introverted. So the thought of being in sales really scared me, but everything that I was learning was just like, you need to get in sales. You need to do things that are not comfortable. That way you can live like most people don't. So I just kind of had that faith in the process and just continued to try new things and fail, and try new things and fail, and get into sales and learn sales and fail at it until eventually I became a real estate agent. And I even failed at that for like the first 4 years. I didn't do very well until I've started niching in the investor world.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to dig into that in a second, but rewind a little bit. What was that sales role that you had, and is that still available today for somebody that's maybe just getting started, that maybe doesn't want to be a real estate agent at first, or just maybe lower barrier to entry?
Yeah. So after the car sales, I started selling Cutco knives. So that was more like on referral. You go to people's houses and you put on a knife demo. And I remember the last one I did, I cut myself really hard with the knife. And I was just bleeding all over these people's table. And it was so embarrassing. And I was just like, I can't do this.
Oh, man. That must have sold them, though, if the knife works that good.
Yeah, actually, I did sell. Yeah, we joked about it, and they bought a knife set. I think people just bought knives from me because they felt sorry for me, because I was just this weird, awkward, shy kid just trying to make a buck.
Oh man.
But it wasn't comfortable. Like, I just didn't feel right about it. Like, but real estate really, it was so much of an easier sales job for me because you made more money and you didn't really have to sell anything. People wanted it. Right. You didn't really have to be pushy. But you still had to sell yourself. You still had to learn the skills and the language.
Right. So is that how why real estate, right? Like, you went from selling cars to Cutco knives and now real estate. Is that just because like your brother was interested in it? You've kind of been like almost like dabbling around it for a while, and you were just, like, maybe real estate is the play.
Yeah, there are multiple different reasons. My dad was actually a real estate agent for a long time. He didn't really do well at it, but I knew that people did good in real estate. But I also knew from reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, that it was more of a self-employed type of job. Mm-hmm. But what I learned buying that first house was that I didn't know anything about real estate, and I needed more education. When I had my car sales job at a dealership, I remember seeing real estate in Florida like super cheap, and this was around 2008, 2009 when the economy was crashing. And I remember seeing these houses because I actually used to live in Florida a couple of years prior to that. But I saw these houses that were once, priced around $250, selling for like $80,000 or less. And I just saw a huge opportunity in Florida, and I just got the bug like, hey, I convinced my girlfriend at the time. I'm like, let's move to Florida. Let's just try something new and see if we can start investing in real estate down there. So I wanted to rent out the house that we bought. I moved out of it, and I hired a property manager.
The one in Kellogg?
Yep, in Kellogg. Okay. It didn't rent out for almost a year. It sat vacant on the it sat vacant for almost a year and wouldn't rent. So
do you know why that is?
I learned a lot about it had to do with location and market timing and the job market in that in that area of town, there weren't a lot of jobs. There was a lot of inventory. But I learned that location is actually like, there's a reason why they say that. Not every time is like 2020 where just, it doesn't matter where you buy a house, you're going to sell it or you're going to rent it. It wasn't like that back then. Location was really important. People didn't have remote jobs as much back then, so that wasn't really a thing. These days, it's actually a lot easier to rent almost anywhere as long as you have good internet. But at the time, location was really important, and it was just another thing I wasn't really aware of. So I had to learn it the hard way.
Totally.
So anyway, I moved to Florida.
What year is this?
Yep.
What year are you moving to Florida?
This was 2010.
Okay.
2010, I moved to Florida, and I actually started having seizures. And I started working at Disney World until I can figure out how to invest in real estate. I saw this sign at a real estate company that said, get your real estate license for only $150. And that's what made me actually want to become an agent. Because I saw that you can get your real estate license for only $150. So I went through these classes and I thought, hey, I might learn a little bit more about real estate if I become an agent. Just like I learned a lot about cars by working at a dealership selling cars. So I saw it as more of an education play than really brushing up on my sales skills. But yeah, I moved to Florida. I actually started having seizures. I lost pretty much everything I had at that point.
Did the seizures cause you to be hospitalized, or was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so is that why you had some big hospital bills, and that's why you kind of started from zero?
Yeah. I had huge hospital bills. I couldn't drive anymore, at least for a few months. Nobody really knew what caused the seizures. I just kind of grew into it. I don't have epilepsy or anything, but I just all of a sudden became, at that age, when you're in your young 20s, your brain is like fully expanding. And if you had any like scarred brain tissue as an infant or anything like that, you could potentially have seizures later in life when your brain expands. So I started having seizures like daily, and it was pretty tough as a broke person in a state where you didn't know anybody. To just get through life. So anyway, that was a really tough time, but going through that and getting through it made me feel pretty invincible. And when I finally somewhat cured myself of the seizures, I just got on the right medicine after a few months. I got a job at Keller Williams Realty, and I considered it was just going to be a temporary thing to learn real estate, but I started listening to a lot of Gary Keller's stuff, and they had this book, The Millionaire Real Estate Agent, and I didn't realize that you could actually grow a business as a realtor, building teams and stuff. I didn't know that was an option. I thought it was just a self-employed gig. So that actually made me really interested to actually stay with something, because before that I had over like 20 different jobs, and I always thought everything would be temporary until I became rich in real estate someday, or built some sort of business. But reading that book and hearing Gary Keller talk about growing real estate teams, and you can actually make a real functioning business out of it and hire people, I just never thought that was an option until I read that, and I decided to go with it.
It's amazing what gets uncovered when you read. I think that's like the most important thing. I've never met anyone who has surmounted anything, like if they've become a millionaire or they've got real estate investing or they're successful business owners, without reading. And so there's one thing you got to do. It's read, I would say. And so when you said you got employed by Keller Williams, were you working for them or were you just an agent with them?
No, I was just an agent. Sorry if I said employed. I didn't mean that. I hung my $150 license with Keller Williams. Yeah. Actually, that's what it costs to go through the schools. I didn't realize it costs more money to go actually get your license and become a real estate, realtor. So it was more expensive than I thought too. And that's what I learned through life is everything's more expensive than you think.
All right, Nick. So let's start here, like your new life in Florida, right? So you don't have any more rentals, I don't think, right? You're kind of starting fresh. What does it look like to start as a real estate agent at Keller Williams in Florida, in Orlando area? It sounds.
Yeah. So I did have that one rental still in Idaho. It just was sitting vacant, costing me money every month.
Okay, gotcha.
So I had that. And then after I had my seizures and racked up hospital bills and had, and as a new real estate agent, you don't make any money. So I was just insanely broke, and I eventually had to do a short sell, or tried to do a short sell on that house that wasn't renting. It eventually got rented after 1 year.
Oh man, Nick, you know what? Zionna's not here. She's not keeping me on track. I totally forgot about the for real deal. This is the first deal that we do. This is basically your first deal that you've ever done as a real estate investor, intentional or unintentional. And that is that deal in Kellogg. And so let's rewind it back for a quick second. And let's just talk about that first deal you got in Kellogg. And so basically what you told us before is that you bought in Kellogg because you couldn't afford anywhere else. And so I suspect you just found this deal on the MLS. Didn't sound like you were very sophisticated at the time. Is that right?
That's right. I was way below sophisticated.
Yeah. And so tell us what you bought it for, and what the mortgage payment was. You said it sat vacant, and then let's hear what you're getting for rents and all that good stuff.
Yeah. So back then, I don't think I really had the ability to search real estate online. We didn't have smartphones back then. I didn't really have a computer with the internet. I didn't know what Realtor.com was or Zillow, and I don't even know if that was out at that time. Maybe it was, but this was 2008. And I asked my brother what real estate agent he used, and he hooked me up with her. And I told her, and at the time I was working for the dealership as an auto detailer, cleaning cars. So I was making good solid income, but it just wasn't enough to buy a property where I was locally. So I had to buy almost an hour away in a rural town in Kellogg, Idaho, over a mountain pass. And there was not much going on in this town. But they did have a very large another dealership, and that's where I became a sales agent. But anyway, I bought this. I was able to get this house for $86,000, and I thought it was a really good deal because it was listed for $120,000 initially. And I guess it didn't really mean anything, but I got an FHA loan. And I asked the seller to cover all my closing costs and my down payment. So back then, they were able to work that out. I didn't even have to come up with that 3.5% down. I just had to come up with $100 for earnest money, and I got that back at closing.
So you basically got into this thing for free. Obviously, different times. You're not doing that today. You need at least probably a few $1,000s to get in. But yeah, keep going. What was your mortgage, your PITI?
Yeah, so this was early 2008. My mortgage payment, I believe it was somewhere around $800 a month. It was maybe just shy of that. My interest rate at the time was 5.75, and I remember anybody who asked about it or I told about that was just blown away. They thought that was insanely cheap. But I do remember my mortgage officer at the time, she was freaking out for some reason, and I didn't know why. But she's like, man, this economy is collapsing. Are you sure you want to do this? And she kept saying, I don't even know if we're gonna be in business tomorrow, which was all. It was just confusing for me. And now thinking back at it, I know what she meant. It was 2008. A lot of lenders went out of business. But anyway, somehow we made the deal go through. I remember, and with FHA, they have to make sure that the roof is in solid condition and all that. But it was wintertime in Idaho, and nobody could inspect the roof, and they just had to push the deal through anyway. I found out later in the spring that the roof was horrible, so I had to put like 10 grand into the roof at the time, and this was back when I had like no money, but I ended up, I think I put about $15,000 of money into that house and labor over about a year and a half, living there, working on it. So bought it for 86, put about 15 into it, moved out of it, and it sat vacant for almost a year. And during that time, I moved back with my brother for a little while, moved down to Florida, and eventually did actually get rented for $500 a month.
Wow.
So I was negative $300 a month.
Yeah. So yeah. What told you to keep holding on to this thing? Like, why not sell it while it's bleeding you?
Well, so that was the thing. The market had collapsed. It was worth a lot less than what I paid. And my girlfriend at the time, I wasn't the kind of guy to just not pay my bills. I always, that was like a top priority thing for me. My dad always taught me, you got to keep a really healthy, good credit score, always pay your bills on time. And she was the first one that told me, hey, it's going to be okay if you just let this go. And I'm like, what? And she's like, it's worth a lot less and you can't afford it anyway. Like I kept getting loans from my mom and my grandmother to like help pay some of the bills. And, I was just racking up personal debt from family to help pay for these things. So I started exploring what are the options of giving this thing back to the bank. And I called them and they told me you can try to do a short sell. And I had it listed with a real estate agent for many months and it just wouldn't sell. And I remember in that market, it was listed for like $35,000 too. It was crazy cheap. Nobody bought it. Nobody was buying anything in that market at the time. I remember my agent told me that 3 homes sold in the last quarter in that little area of town.
Wow.
So I eventually did a deed in lieu. And that's where I gave the keys back to the bank, had it in broom swept condition, and it wouldn't hit you as hard as a foreclosure, because you're kind of being compliant with the bank and giving it back. And I think they even gave me $2,000 for giving it back. And eventually it ended up selling for $26,000 as an REO.
Wow. Jeez. So you got hit, like you got hit of the '08 stuff and here, and I think the take I get on this is you learned a lot, and here you are today, 10, 15 years later with a lot of success. And so let's go back to where you are in Florida. You just get your license at Keller Williams. And tell us, like, how are you doing in Florida with your license? And are you buying any rentals at that time as well?
No, not yet. I mean, keep in mind, I had just gotten over my seizure episodes and still very, very broke, living not just paycheck to paycheck, but I had no paychecks because I was a new real estate agent. I eventually got a car after I had to trade some motorcycles. I had this little Vino, which is like a Vespa that I was initially showing real estate on. And I was able to trade it on Craigslist for like some chick bike. It looked a little bit fancier. It was a Honda Rebel.
Nice.
But I had to, this was my only means of transportation, showing homes to people. And eventually it got super embarrassing when it was like raining in Florida, like hard, and I would show up on a bike.
Yeah.
So the first 6 months were brutal. I think I made maybe $3,000 after the first 6 months, and eventually, just right away, I just bought a car. That way, I didn't have to show vehicles in the rain anymore, or show houses in the rain.
Yeah,
but by the end of the first year, I sold 14 homes, which was really good at the time, especially for a rookie that didn't know the area and didn't know anybody, because most of the people in my office, they weren't selling anything.
So what's the secret sauce?
I was just desperate, relentless. I would work anybody's leads that they couldn't get to. The first year I was heavily reliant on agents in my office to give me whatever scraps they didn't want to deal with, and I would eventually convert buyers. I showed a lot of REO properties. I started working with investors, buying rentals. But I was working 70 hours a week. So I mean, the secret sauce was hard work and just being relentless and just not giving up.
There's one common denominator from any successful real estate agent that I've ever met, and it's hard work. I've never seen anybody just kind of coast into this career and actually succeed at it. Whether it's pounding the phones, whether you're taking people's scraps, attending a gajillion open houses, whatever that is, whatever your thing is, you just pound it and pound it and pound it for a couple of years. And so congrats to your success, man. I think that's great. Yeah. 14 in the first year. That's a huge win. Yeah. And so what are you doing?
It's not quite 100 like yours. Well, I just want to say Not quite like your first year where you sold 100 properties, but so
Well,
that's like
different.
you know,
Yeah. I worked for 2 years
different
prior than that, just
circumstances maybe.
writing for nothing. Well, writing for what wasn't sure what I was writing for. But yeah, man. So tell us, man. 14 in the first one. That's really big. You know, you're probably making what, like maybe 70, 80 grand a year in Florida with that.
Actually, so no, my first year I think I made 10 grand because these houses were really cheap. It was a lot of work. The commissions were really small, and I split a lot of the commissions with agents that would give me the leads. So I mean, my average check was like $700 or $800.
Jeez.
Maybe 1,500. I remember my biggest check ever was like $3,000 until I moved back to North Idaho and started selling real estate there. So
Okay.
it was a lot of hard work, a lot of learning, and very little pay.
Okay. And so why? So humble beginnings for sure on this real estate agent stuff. And I think that's while it may seem dire in the moment, that's really what shapes a successful real estate agent or investor going forward, right? Like the hard times you've had is what molds you and what basically makes you like a stone that can't be broken as times get harder later. And so you're in Florida for how long? For 2 years?
Yeah, 2 years.
2 years. And so you move back to Northern Idaho. And give us a year here.
Yeah, so this was 2012 then.
Okay.
I'm late 2000. Yeah, around 2012, I'm back in Idaho, and I keep my license in Florida active so that I can still do referrals for my database. And I came up to Idaho with 9 deals pending, and I remember 7 of them fell apart. And they're for various reasons, but I just felt like I had a lot of bad luck. But I moved back up to Idaho, and I take a few months off to kind of regain some savings account. And I go back to work at that dealership again, selling cars while I have my license. And I knew that I would get my real estate license here in Idaho and start investing. Eventually I was like, I gotta eventually invest. Too many years are going by. I'm getting older, even though I was in my mid-20s.
Yeah, no, it's funny how like even when you're young, it feels like time is just going too fast. You need to keep going. But like, dude, good on you for being able to see that. Basically, ditching the business you started in Florida to then start anew again in Idaho. And so like, how do you just restart, right? It's 2012, and now you're like all that hard work you put into Florida is kind of gone to waste. I mean, I guess you still have the skills you learned, but all the clients and relationships are gone.
Right. Yeah. Because that was a big part of being a real estate agent. You know, growing a database is everything. Sure. I mean, growing those skills is also everything as well. But if you don't have a database, you don't have a business. So I did have to restart up here. But I was okay with that. You know, I was kind of homesick. I grew up here, and I'm glad to be back. But as soon as I moved back up, I actually got a divorce. So that was kind of unexpected. Got divorced. I went bankrupt. You know, I felt like I shed all this kind of bad stuff early in life that people typically go through. And I was able to just kind of start fresh. And I had at that time, at least I still felt like I can do whatever I wanted to do because I had gone through so much, you know, before I hit 25, where I can pretty much just decide what to do at that point and just run with it. And so what I decided was I'm going to do this real estate thing again. I'm going to do it better. I'm actually going to grow a team one day, and I'm going to invest in real estate. And I just convinced myself that it was going to happen.
Yeah, there's something that's like The Secret, right? Like if you ever read that book or watched that documentary of you kind of just will things to happen and then they tend to happen. And so what was your first step in starting the business in Idaho? Like, were you calling people? Were you throwing events? Were you?
Yeah. So surprisingly, it was actually tougher the second time around. I joined a team, a real estate team, which wasn't really in the plans, but it just kind of happened. It was offered to me. And I thought maybe at least I can learn quite a bit because I knew eventually I wanted to grow my own team someday. What I did learn, I spent a year on this guy's real estate team as a buyer's agent, what I learned was that I don't have the same motivation working for somebody else as I do building my own thing. But I also got to learn a lot of valuable things because real estate in North Idaho is so much different than real estate in Florida. To an extent. I mean, you're dealing with a lot more acreage properties, single family homes, wells, septic systems, all these things that I didn't really have, that I didn't build any knowledge on in Florida. In Florida, I was dealing a lot with townhomes and condos and really cookie cutter homes and cookie cutter neighborhoods. So I didn't really get to learn about all the infrastructure that goes into a home, like I did in Idaho. And it's just a different culture up here, a different vibe, and people do everything by referrals. And people don't respect real estate agents up here nearly as much as they did in Florida because there's so many of them.
Yeah. And so you would just kind of like, your sphere of influence is what it sounds like has really got you going, right? Like you grew up here, you probably had some friends and from family, and then you just slowly you're just growing your business over time. Or are you? Yeah.
That's what I thought. That was my impression. I thought, I'm going to move up somewhere where I actually have friends and family. But dude, I was wrong. Like this market is just different. Like people only want to work with those that they know, like, and trust. But they only really knew me. I guess I don't know if I was really liked or trust much yet because I was kind of just this young real estate agent. There's so many real estate agents in this area to compete with. So I knew I had to go, really double down in the investor world and really know my stuff and be that guy that people actually could trust with investments and that kind of stuff. I wanted to eventually be known as that guy that people would go to. So I knew I had to do it myself.
Yeah, no, it's amazing, man. And being a new resident of here, before we did meet, I had heard your name a million times. So I would say that fast forward, a few years, congratulations, you did make it into being the known, liked, and trust investor-friendly real estate agent up here. So,
dude, thank you.
Yeah, and so I want to talk let's talk about we are kind of running out of time, but I want to. There's a lot more to uncover, so I want to make sure that we get there. So tell us about. You didn't like working for this guy, right? You were there for about a year, and then you start doing your own thing, and you start basically doubling down on the investor category. And so, how are you getting these investor leads? How are you becoming this person? Like, are you starting to invest yourself now with a little bit more intention instead of just buying a place that you think you can afford because the price dropped?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to it. First off, it wasn't that I didn't like working for this guy. It's just that I didn't like my motivation levels. They weren't as high. I actually really liked the guy, and that was the hardest part about leaving their team. Was like I made a couple of great friends, but I just couldn't be motivated unless I was building my own brand. But so what I did was I started going to a lot of real estate seminars about learning how to flip houses and that kind of stuff. Whatever would come to town, I would always go, and I would collect a database of people that I met there, other people that were seriously interested in investing. And I started growing my database, investor specific or people that wanted to be investors. And I would go to this event in Spokane that this hard money lender put on the first Thursday of each month at 6:30 in Spokane. And then eventually their office shut down, and I thought I'd take that time slot and I would start my own thing at Keller Williams. And I wanted to start this group of investors, and I kind of modeled it off this guy who runs a team in Alaska, Kevin Cross, but he has a meetup format where that's their main source of generating leads is through monthly seminars. And it was something that was way out of my comfort zone. But I decided to do it anyway because I'm kind of a nerd and I geek out on the numbers of how many contacts you have to make to eventually get a contract and eventually sell homes. And it was a lot of phone calls that you have to make, at least for me, because my conversion ratios weren't the greatest. But if you can meet people face to face, your conversion ratios go way up. So I just thought, hey, why don't I just start this meetup and see if I can get people to show up, and we'll talk about real estate investing. And eventually it got very systemized, and it also held me accountable to actually show up and do this lead generating like almost automatically, and very consistent. It was the first Thursday of each month at 6:30, and I had to be there because I put it all over the internet. I invited people, and I booked the room indefinitely, forever. It's the first Thursday at 6 month, and it's the first Thursday at 6:30. Keller Williams Realty in Coeur d'Alene. People are going to show up whether I came or not, so I had to be there, and I was the guy running it, and I had to learn the total market overview and share that. So I just eventually kind of became known as the expert in North Idaho by doing that consistently.
Yeah, and isn't that funny, right? You just said two times in this interview you're talking about compound interest and how time works, right? Like, first you heard about it with the money. Now you're hearing about it right now with like consistency and throwing a meetup. And so like, in Denver and in basically all the places that we go to, we throw meetups as well. That's our main source of leads. That's how you foster a community. That's how you get people liking, and trusting you. And more so being the authority figure at that meetup, I think is key too, because then you're trusted, right? You're getting up there, giving them an update on the market, giving an update on maybe like some things that are going under contract, some new ideas, and you're educating people. That's being known is easy. Being liked, kind of easy. Being trusted is really hard. And this is just a way to build trust by just continuing to provide value to a lot of people with really nothing in return, right? You know the things will come, but like really you weren't expecting anything in return. And so,
no, that's right.
Yeah. And so I think that's, if you are thinking about becoming a real estate agent out there and cold calling isn't your thing, or like open houses aren't your thing, and you're okay with maybe a little bit of a slower, but certainly like high probability of closing kind of time frame, meetups, right? Just keep hosting those events. Nick, sorry, I think I cut you off.
No, that's okay. And I also wanted to say too, because we didn't really get into this, I didn't have a whole lot of investing experience when I started it either. I had only flipped one home, and I was working on my second house flip. But it didn't seem to matter with people. They still saw you as the expert because you at least had some sort of real estate investing experience, and you were the one putting on the show. So if anyone's listening to this that outside of North Idaho, I would highly recommend it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Nick, okay, so, we've got a good idea of how you became a successful real estate agent, right? And then from there, I know you built a team and all that, but I think that might be beyond the scope of what we'll talk about today. I want to talk a little bit about your investment portfolio. And so your Kellogg house is, that was your college education right there in real estate. What are you like? So you said you're buying some flips. So you started flipping before even house hacking or buying just traditional rental properties?
That's right. Yeah. I flipped and bought rentals for about 3 years before I ever bought my personal house. Yeah. And today I've got I think I've got 15 rentals, and one of those is an RV park. And don't have anything outside of the state yet, but I'm starting to look nationwide now for multifamily deals.
Very exciting. Very, very exciting. And so let's talk about how you kind of you reinvented yourself as a real estate investor in Northern Idaho. And so, these flips that you're doing, how are you finding the deals? Are you truly flipping them, or are you just burying them? Are you keeping them as rentals, or do you take the profits from your flips and then buy rentals?
So it's evolved. At first, it was just fixing and flipping homes with my brother, and we took the profits from the first one, and we were amazed we never made this much money in our lives. We kept half of the profits, and we reinvested the second half into the next property. They were off-market deals at first, and then eventually we found plenty on market. There were REOs at the time, and I would just MLS REOs. I would just always make low offers, until eventually a bank accepted one. So that worked for me for a while, and eventually, as I kept doing the meetups, I would niche and focus on wholesalers, and I would kind of really cater to those wholesalers, and I want to be like the best real estate agent I can for those people. So those kind of became my core clients, and I let everybody else go to the team. And I just wanted to work with wholesalers, and I actually got a lot of deals from wholesalers directly. But yeah, I would buy a couple of fix and flips, and I would take the money and reinvest, and eventually buy a rental property. Buy a couple of flips, buy a rental property, and then eventually started doing the BRRRR method once I actually qualified for financing, like long-term, good interest rate debt stuff. And it's just continued to evolve.
Amazing, man. Amazing. And so your 15 rentals all here in Northern Idaho. What is that? So, the process sounds tried and true, right? Like obviously you had to get good at flipping houses. I'm sure you made a handful of mistakes. We could probably do a whole podcast on your house flipping endeavors. Could probably do a whole nother one on the transition and all that and building your rental portfolio and all of the lessons you learned building that rental portfolio. But, with 15 units, how much passive income are you getting now? Do you consider yourself financially independent? And now I know that how many hours do you now spend now that you've got a real estate team?
All good questions. Let me see if I can keep up. Well, with the real estate team, I know if I wanted to, I can probably put maybe 4 hours a week into the real estate team business if I wanted. But I typically, I like to spend more time there for now. But at least I got it set up pretty well where I run the team with a partner and she does most of the coaching and mentoring. I mostly put out fires. And then I'm there for the weekly meetings and I always show up to the meetups and we do 3 a month now. We do one in Coeur d'Alene, one in Sandpoint, and now we do a third one for out-of-state investing. So I always show up to those.
Beautiful.
Let's see. And then as far as the rental portfolio with the cash flow, right now the way it sits, this RV park we just finished up. We just opened it like a week ago, so I anticipate my cash flow going up. But right now, I think it's about $6,000 a month in passive income after all mortgages are paid. Hopefully, I can get that up to closer to $9,000 once that RV park is filled. And it took a long time to get to that. Like at first, it was just these houses were making maybe $200 a month. But over time, the mortgages stayed the same and rents went up, and that's where the real money is made. Just with again, like compound interest and time, and through time, my cash flow went up by me really doing nothing.
Yeah, I'm happy you said that, right? Because I think a lot of people jump to these kind of sexy strategies that are kind of buzzwords today, like the short-term rental and medium-term rental. And I'm not bashing it, right? Like I love that, love those strategies, and you can make a lot of money on each individual house that way. But there is something to kind of going the old school way, having to be very passive, and you can kind of focus on your business, on acquiring more rentals, and then probably your family life as well too. And so like I feel just by talking with you, Nick, that like you've got balance because you never seem stressed. You always kind of seem like you've got a level head, and you've got that. Maybe you're good at hiding it, but like I guess what does that balance look like for you nowadays, right? In terms of downtime as well as work time.
Dude, honestly, it's so much better these days. I mean, with the exception that there were a few months this year where it was very stressful, and that's because I knowingly over leveraged myself and took on way too many projects. I got into like 26 different flips, burrs, and builds at one time. Within the last, I'm down to like 13, 14 right now. But for the most part, I don't work nearly as many hours. I make more money. And I am able to more, take care of my body and my kids, and my wife has a much better lifestyle. So, the work was worth it. And I know if I didn't just stick with real estate, I'd probably just be in this vicious loop cycle of just, starting again. And the best thing I ever did was I just stayed with real estate and stayed consistent and did the same thing again and again and again. And it's the hardest thing for a lot of new people to do, is because they don't really know if it's working out. And for me, like I couldn't really tell for like almost the first 5 years if it was going to work until eventually it did.
Yeah, it's amazing the barriers that you got through like between the bankruptcy and the foreclosure, not the deed in lieu, and the moving to Florida, moving back. Like it just shows that like there are going to be struggles. That's what shapes what you now are today, which is a very successful real estate agent and a very successful real estate investor here in the Northern Idaho region. And now you're looking to expand even further to other states. And so, yeah, man, Nick, you've got such an amazing story. We do need to transition into the final part of our show. But before we do you have any parting words of wisdom for the audience?
Oh, man. I would just continue to consume content and education. If you're interested in real estate investing, don't give it up. Just continue to show up to, if you show up to meetups, continue to show up to it and you'll eventually make it happen. I truly believe that the secret sauce to being successful in any kind of new endeavor is just to keep showing up, and eventually you'll figure it out.
Love that. Love it. All right, Nick, it is time to transition into our Final Four.
The Final Four.
This is different with just me and not Zeona. But Nick, me, I guess I'm going to kick it off. So Nick, what book are you reading right now?
The book I'm reading right now is Principles by Ray Dalio.
Ooh, that's a good one. What do you think?
So far, so good. It's he talks a lot about crops and farms, but I love the little golden nuggets that you pull out of it. So I think I'm halfway through it.
Nice, yeah. He's got a lot of gold nuggets.
How about you? Did you read that one?
I have read that one. It's been a couple of years. I remember liking it, and I remember I pulled some gold nuggets out of it, but I don't think I could remember what gold nuggets I pulled from that specific book. But I know they're up here somewhere.
Yeah.
Second question, Nick. What is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
The best piece of advice I ever received for like my real estate, I guess for my real estate business, it was actually from the guy that I was on his team. When I left his team, I was struggling for just a little bit, but I remember he just said, you just got to talk to people. And he is a highly successful guy. Like he was a guy that was making $500,000 a year, but that was the advice he gave to me. He said, just talk to people. So that was, I would say that would be one of the most, and then also Tony Robbins, in his book, Money, he said like the secret to getting rich is by offering more value to people than anybody else in a particular field. So that I kind of stuck with me when it came to local real estate investing. And if I can just provide value to real estate investors out there, as much value as I can, that eventually I'll get rich from it.
Totally. Yeah. And look at you now. Third question. What is your why?
This may sound a little odd, but my big why is I'm afraid of becoming old and broke.
Yeah,
that's what motivates me.
Well, don't
and I always, my why goes back and forth, but I feel like, most people are more motivated by pain than pleasure. So why not just embody it? I'm afraid of going broke, and I know I know the numbers with inflation and all that stuff. And if I don't position myself to become wealthy, it's going to be a rough life, and I just don't want a rough life when I'm older.
I like that. Yep, I think that's a good way to look at it, my man. All right, dude. Last question. What was your favorite restaurant as a kid?
Ooh, Pizza Hut.
Pizza Hut.
Pizza Hut was my favorite.
Cheese. Oh. Can't relate.
Oh, it was so good. You know what? It is not nearly as good anymore. I think they've changed up their recipe a lot over the last couple decades. But Pizza Hut used to be a really good restaurant back in the day.
Dude, you know what? You know what has really come from like nothing? Domino's. Like, I'm not a huge pizza eater, but like if I'm gonna if I need a pizza or I need a quick bite, like Domino's actually makes a really good thin crust pizza. That's my go-to. Yeah.
And I remember when I was a kid, Domino's was the worst pizza you can get.
Exactly.
And
Domino's
now it's up there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So things change in all industries, right? All right, Nick. Last other question. Where can people find out more about you if they want to reach out, if they want to, maybe they want to invest in Northern Idaho, whatever it is, spill the beans.
Yeah. So you can find me on Facebook. I'm Nick Beveridge on Facebook, or you can go to our website at northidahorei.com. Boom.
Reach out to Nick if you've got any questions. He's a wealth of knowledge and gives so much value to everyone he talks to. So Nick, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. Appreciate you being here. And we'll talk soon.
Of course. All right. Thank you.
And that was Nick Beveridge. Man, Nick is a wealth of knowledge. There's just so much stuff that's in there that you could uncover. Man, where do I even start, right? And so first thing I want to just iterate is that if you are thinking about becoming a real estate agent, really you need to put in the work, right? I could interview 100 successful real estate agents on here, and I guarantee you that every single one put in an ungodly amount of work in the beginning, but now work a lot less than anybody else and probably make a lot more than anybody else you know. So you need to put in that time and energy up front to really build that sustainable business. Nick shows that here. I just love how he is so open about, hey, he got foreclosed on. He went bankrupt. He got divorced, right? This is like all before the dude is 25 years old, but he's still stuck with real estate. Finally started to figure things out, started gaining some momentum. Now he's got a portfolio of 15 rentals here in northern Idaho, and he's really just starting to crush it in all facets of life. And what's crazy is that he's not doing the same thing everybody else is. He's not following the shiny object of medium-term rentals and short-term rentals. And by the way, which is totally fine, right? They're great ways to invest. But he's doing it the old-fashioned way, right? Long-term, easy peasy. And he's gotten up to $6,000 in monthly rents. Could he go out and transition those and make them $20,000? Sure. But that would sacrifice his lifestyle. That would sacrifice his other business, his real estate business, and other things. So sometimes you just got to pick a thing and run with it and make that your true business model. So again, Nick was a great resource. Absolutely loved him on the show. If you liked the show, please leave us a rating and review. We absolutely love reading those. We love seeing how we're doing. And give us a follow on Instagram, right? I'm the Fi Guy. Zeona is Zeona McIntyre. And we hope to keep seeing you guys here every single week because this is a lot of fun. We'll see you all next week.
That's it for this episode of Investify. We hope that these nuggets of real estate wisdom lead to more savvy financial planning and a clearer path towards financial freedom. For more content like this, subscribe to the show at investify.com. Don't forget to leave a rating and share it with your friends. Together, we can transform more real estate newbies into successful and clever investors. Thank you so much for listening. See you on the next one.